He has been received by CSICT, Bwana Owalo, alongside others. And the crowds here have given him an accolade of clap and celebration, being their way of receiving former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And Mwasame, former President Uhuru Kenyatta is really the person who went on to identify the many talents that were in the late Professor Magoha when he appointed him as the chairperson of NEC. Remember, this time Magoha was reaching the end date, or the near end date in his operations as the VC of Nairobi University. Perhaps he was there thinking, what next? Do I go back to class? Do I go back home and relax a bit? But Uhuru Kenyatta said, hey, come here and serve as the chairperson for the Kenya National Examination Council. And it is this platform that perhaps gave Magoha a household name. From that point onwards, even young children, when you ask them who Magoha is, they know Magoha is a waziri. Later, when that chapter came to a close, President Uhuru Kenyatta went on to give him yet a bigger and more huge responsibility, that of being the Cabinet Secretary for Education. And on this day, it will be very important to listen to former President Uhuru Kenyatta to see how he understood or how he interacted, how he worked with the late Professor George Magoha. Remember, earlier I was telling you, Marsaman, what I borrowed from Magoha, I had this ability of engaging down here with Wananchi, with Wanjiko at Langas Primary School, and up there at the executive. Now, the executive in which he served under President Uhuru Kenyatta, the executive will be here, and the ex-executive, and they will be also allowing us to know how much more did he do at cabinet level? How much more did he do behind closed doors?
Exactly, and you could not mention Professor Magoha's achievements and coming to limelight without mentioning that gentleman that just walked in, former President Uhuru Kenyatta. This is a man who identified his talent, who identified his capability. Remember, he was talking tough when even he was the chairman of NEC, and at times he could even look like he was superseding the CS then, Ambassador Amina Mohammed, and people became concerned, and actually it became into account that he became the CS because he was a tough-talking man, and indeed he did what he was always talking in public. And therefore, we do understand that if the former President Uhuru Kenyatta will get an opportunity, he will tell us some of the things that us did not understand to the medical field. Again, Lois, it's important to note that some of the people who served with Professor Magoha could just talk about him without fear of contradiction, that he was a no-nonsense man. And therefore, like you said, politicians are still streaming in,
yeah.
And it's not easy to keep politics out of politicians. I do understand that it will not be very easy for the MC to keep politics at bay at this particular funeral. Lazima kidogo itatokea.
I just give him a tip. Just ask them to stand up and raise their hands and say hello to Wananchi. I don't know what that would happen. But Moseme, you are touching on how Professor Magoha seems to have this seamless transition from one office to another.
Yes, yes.
We see him starting as a lecturer in Lagos. Later he comes to lecture at the University of Nairobi. He goes on to become the dean of the dean at the University of Nairobi. We see him also becoming the VC. When his term comes to end, we see him transitioning into NEC as the chairperson. When his term also came to an end, we see him transition into a cabinet secretary for education. When that came to an end after the general election. You said he went back to class and he didn't bother after coming from a such high profile and among the biggest jobs in public service in the country. He went back perhaps to where he started. Remember, he started as a lecturer and now he had gone back to class again. But then again, Masame, this shows us the kind of passion that the late professor had, and away from his other accolades, away from his undergraduate degrees, from his master's, from his PhD, this particular Professor George Magoha was a respected human health researcher with his background being in medical training. Now, there was something that he was doing which is very, very interesting, and that is research. He put a lot of research into his life, and he was instrumental in discovering a number of drugs treatment. This shows that he was, as much as he was applying his career day to day in matters education, in matters public service, his number one love, his number one profession, matters education, were key to him. There's this research, a number of researches that he engaged in. We are told that one of the researchers included the cancer of prostate, where Magoha investigated the epidemiology and clinical behavior of prostate cancer in Black Africans in a study, and he collaborated with the University of Lagos and of course other universities across the world. But you see, Magoha was perhaps this was his way of offering solutions to Africans, because he comes from Africa, offering solutions to Kenyans and others. And you see, his study was tailor-made. This particular study for cancer of the prostate, it was tailor-made in investigating the epidemiology and clinical behavior of prostate cancer in Black Africans. That shows Magoha's passion was also in creating solutions. And away from other studies, we see these are the number of scholarly work that he engaged himself in.
Also of importance also to note that cancer of the testicular system, this is something that he carried out. He conducted an extensive research on testicular cancer to determine why the disease is uncommon among Black Africans. And he really wanted to also get solutions to this particular disease, because this is the man who was on a mission, like we rightfully mentioned earlier on. He's a man who could mean business, go for it, and he actually got answers. I remember that was not the only research he did. Yes, he also made a research on the cancer of the penis. This is actually about us and me.
Interesting.
Yes.
And here Magoha conducted research on penile cancer in Africa. Such an interesting conversation. And what he wanted to know if there was a link between this type of cancer and circumcision in adolescents and adults. Yeah?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
This is something that's interesting in this, the CV. That explains why his CV was as huge as you saw it in Parliament when he turned up for vetting. This is a man whose CV could not even fit in a lorry. I could say that lorry that Azimio la Umoja carried out and presented at the Supreme Court. That is how his CV could look like. This is a man who did everything to make sure that he contributes heavily to the education standards, both in Kenya and even at international standards.
And you see, more summer. Clearly, Professor Magoha, the late professor, was a bright brain. He was a bright boy right from his young age. But how do you become a professor? And instead of just settling and just operating at your big offices in Nairobi, you yet again dig deeper to start seeing how the knowledge you have acquired on clinical medicine can be of benefit to fellow Africans and humanity in general. And so here we also saw Professor Magoha do a very recent study. He did a very recent study, and I want to imagine this was around the time that he was serving as cabinet secretary. He did a study focusing on HIV protection. Here, he collaborated on the study with the University of Manitoba in Canada and the University of Washington in the United States. The study was conducted in Kisumu, and this study sought to determine the effect of circumcision on the incidence of HIV. So, Masame, really, this is